We have a home theater in our basement that I've been piecing together for the past several years, and I finally decided that it was time to make it smart. I found a one-stop shop in SwitchBot for the essentials, so today we are making our home theater smart with SwitchBot.
I'm Patrick Hunt, and I want you to like smart home tech as much as I do. Real solutions with Matter, applehome, and a little creativity. Weekly, I'll show you how small upgrades can make a big difference. Welcome.
Let's start with a quick overview of the devices I actually have in the home theater, because I think it's important to kind of get that context to see what I actually felt like I needed to make it an efficient, smart home theater. If you can't tell from the footage, I haven't put tens of thousands of dollars into this home theater. It's just our basement and I'm working with what we have. And the bane of my existence is actually right over my right shoulder there. So first I have the BenQ HT3550 projector. I have the Denon X2500H for my surround sound receiver. And then I have an NVIDIA Shield TV Pro for the streaming device that I run basically all of my content through. The first thing I knew I needed when approaching this project was some good shades for the doors. With all that natural light coming in, the projector image kind of starts to fall apart. And then after several attempts of trying to get the projector, the NVIDIA Shield, and the surround sound receiver into applehome and failing, I knew that I needed some sort of infrared blaster that I can connect these to and be able to control those in applehome. And that's actually a really important part of this. I try to live in applehome. So everything that I'm trying to do here, whether it's automations or scenes, I really want to try them all in applehome first. SwitchBot was nice enough to send me the Hub 2, the universal remote, and their brand new adjustable shades for the doors. I only knew that these products existed. I didn't really know what their capabilities were or even how they worked to a certain extent. So I'm gonna try to detail as best as possible my experience kind of just figuring it out. I do typically try to stay away from extra hubs, and I know a lot of people feel that way. We want a simple setup with just the device connected to our network, without that hub as a middleman. In this case, the Hub 2 actually is the IR blaster, and it also comes with a humidity sensor, a temperature sensor, and 2 programmable buttons on it. Not to mention that as a hub, it is needed for that Matter integration into applehome for all those secondary devices, like the shades or the universal remote or any of the infrared devices that I'm gonna be connecting. I wanna start with a product that I like the best and I felt integrated the best into applehome and was just overall the best experience, and then work my way towards the not so great. And so that first product is the adjustable shades. And I know they've received some mixed reviews, a little bit over the installation process, maybe over the overall quality of the product. But I would love for you to hear my perspective as to why you might compromise on a thing here or a thing there, because overall the product is pretty solid, especially at the price point. What I want to start with is that these shades exist at all. These are the first smart adjustable shades, so you're actually going to be physically cutting them yourself, and they give you the tools to do that in the kit. When you open the box, there aren't that many pieces in there. There's a few tools that you need to use, some brackets and some screws. It's not like putting together a shelf where you have 50,000 brackets and 50,000 screws. If you've bought shades in the past and you've gotten a good look at them and installed them yourself, you can see that shades aren't exactly rocket science. And now I'm specifically saying shades, not blinds. I actually think blinds might be rocket science, but shades are not. Shades are very straightforward. If you're like me and you do like to tinker and you find that you can save some money on a product by kind of doing it yourself a little bit, and that's the first point to these shades for possibly being the right product for you. I had 2 shades to install on the doors, which are right next to my screen. And I knew that I would be working around the doorknob and the deadbolt. And so I knew that I needed to be very careful with my measuring. On the first shade, the directions actually, I feel, led me astray a little bit. I had to measure and remeasure about 5 times because I didn't quite understand how that was going to translate to the actual cutting. There is a little bit of common sense that I think you need to apply during the setup process. I paid too much attention to the directions on the first shade and it took me about an hour and a half, which is a long time. But once I understood the shade, the second shade, I didn't even look at the directions at all, and it took me maybe a half an hour. That's how easy these shades are to install. And really the hardest part is that cutting process and kind of assembling on the floor. Putting them up on the window or the door is just kind of clicking them into place in the brackets. At the time of this recording, they're actually on a pretty deep discount, and I think the price point they are at the discount is where they should stay. And hopefully SwitchBot keeps regular discounts coming so people can get them at that discounted price. The shades also come with a small solar panel that you can use to constantly keep them charged. The solar panel needs to be stuck to the window so it can get good sunlight to charge. And it's not the most beautiful thing, but it's not terribly ugly either. And that's the compromise that I'm making so I don't ever have to charge them myself. One thing that I don't love is that the roller hardware at the top does stick out quite a bit from my door. And so when I open my door, it does hit the door frame because that sticks out too. This is not going to be an issue with anyone installing this on Windows, but I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone that's looking to install these on their doors. When it comes to integrating these into Apple Home, you have to first get them set up through the hub, and then you have to get them into the Matter integration, and then that goes into Apple Home. So it is kind of a 2 or 3 step process, which was a little bit confusing, and I still am not entirely sure that I did it right. And therein lies why I just don't love hubs. I wish this were a Matter over Thread shade, and it was just directly integrated into Apple Home. That would make things a lot easier. Once in Apple Home, the shades are categorized, and they operate exactly as I would hope they did. And that was such a relief. I really didn't know what to expect when going through the hub to get the shades into Apple Home, but seeing them there, they're exactly what I wanted, and so I'm so happy with that. SwitchBot says that you can actually change out the material of the shade itself. I'm not much of a vinyl guy, and if I were trying to outfit the majority of my house with shades, I probably would not choose this shade if it meant that I had to change the material out myself. The cost savings is great for the shade, but I really don't want to put all of that effort into multiple shades around my house if I just don't like the shade material itself. But for our home theater on a set of 2 doors, I'm not complaining at all about the material. I think it's absolutely fine for its application. So overall, I'm pleasantly surprised with the shades for the home theater purpose. Spend your money on some great speakers or a really great projector and just put these shades up on your windows, and I'm sure you'll be more than happy. And so that brings me to the Hub 2. And as I mentioned previously, I'm using this mainly for the IR blaster, but it is necessary if you want to get the shades and other secondary devices into Apple Home. I really needed the infrared blaster for my projector, my surround sound system, and for the Shield Pro. And I felt that the Hub was a solid way to go about it because I got that IR blaster with some other perks associated with the Hub, and I was able to integrate my shades into Apple Home as well. I decided not to hide the Hub and just treat it as a Hub. I wanted to make the most out of it and actually use it as a device in my theater. Like I said before, there's 2 programmable buttons on it, and it has a temperature sensor and a humidity sensor. So I programmed one button to be my movie time button. I can walk into the basement, press the button, the lights come down, the projector turns on, the surround sound turns on, some other lights turn off, and the shades close. That's my movie time scene, and I think that button is great for it. One small note that I'll say about that though, is that somewhere in the settings, I turned off the display, and those buttons are technically an on and off button, and it's the on button that I programmed that scene in Apple Home. So now if I just want to turn the display on, that scene turns on too. I wish the buttons were just generic buttons instead of being on and off buttons, because that would make this a little bit more clear, and that mistake probably wouldn't happen as often. Additionally, there's the ability to create scenes and program those buttons in the SwitchBot app. And then there's also the ability to create scenes and program those buttons in the Apple Home app. And those are 2 separate things that could possibly conflict with each other, which, as you're seeing, is exactly what's happened here with my on-off movie time scene situation. When it came to integrating those infrared devices into the Hub, this was not an awesome experience. I think part of it is just the nature of the technology, and the other part of it is maybe the product itself. Not entirely sure. I started with the projector. You're supposed to point the remote at the Hub and hit the power button while the projector is looking for that signal. And every time, whether it was the projector or the surround sound system, it said that it found 2 remote templates. And you're supposed to try those templates on your phone to see if the device reacts the way that it's supposed to. And on both occasions, the projector and the surround sound system, the devices did not respond to those templates. So I had to go to the secondary way of connecting them, which is by finding the brand and finding the model, and then finding the remote associated and seeing if that worked. Both the projector and the surround sound system did work at that point after much trial and error, and I was able to get the remotes associated with the Hub 2, which I will later use for the universal remote. The one that I spent the most time troubleshooting was the Shield TV Pro remote. That one is actually a Bluetooth remote, and when trying to integrate it into the Hub 2, it looks like there are templates and the brand is there and the model is there and everything, but it's a Bluetooth remote. So it actually isn't infrared, and that's why it wasn't working. I had to use the universal remote later to pair it with the Shield TV Pro, and basically that just takes my Shield TV Pro remote out of the equation entirely. But because I had to do it this way, that Shield TV Pro can't really be used in any scenes or automations from the hub 2. The only way it can really be controlled is through the universal remote. Now to the part of this that was a bit frustrating because of the nature of the technology. When talking about integrating infrared devices into a smart home, you are reaching just a little bit further than I think the platforms and the technology is prepared for. And this may always be the case because when these devices were built, they weren't meant to be integrated into your smart home. It was only made possible because of what I would call kind of hacking. When I use HomeBridge, I know going into it that it's gonna be a little hacky if I do get something into Apple Home. I've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of devices that I've put into Apple Home, but that wasn't my expectation here, and I think it's because I just wasn't prepared for that. So the projector and the surround sound system only come into Apple Home as an on-off switch. And I wanted a little bit more functionality. I expected a little bit more functionality because I was mapping that remote. But that was just due to me not doing a whole lot of research and seeing that the infrared blasters don't exactly support those sorts of functions yet. But the way that that shows up in daily functionality and daily usage and why it matters is my projector, while it requires one power button press to turn on, it requires 2 to turn off. And in Apple Home, if I slide the switch down to turn it off, it thinks it's turned it off, but all it did is bring up the splash screen saying you gotta press the power button one more time to turn it off. In Apple Home, it thinks it's off. So I have to do some playing around with the power button in Apple Home to actually make it turn off, or I have to physically hit the power button again. Not exactly smart, but I could use the remote to turn it off. If you take a look at my home theater room in Apple Home, I think it's the messiest room that I have here because all of the devices have been categorized into the other category, and that includes the switches that I got as well. These Innovelli White Series switches show up under other. So just about every device in this room isn't categorized, and that's killing me. I really wish that they were categorized under the right category. So overall, the Hub 2 is fitting nicely in the home theater, giving me that matter control over all those devices in Apple Home. And it is a little bit better of an experience in the SwitchBot app, but I really would like that experience to be a lot better in Apple Home. I imagine SwitchBot is trying to keep you in the SwitchBot app primarily because they can give you more functionality and more control rather than relying on Apple Home to play catch up with the tech. And then lastly, there's the universal remote. And this should be the very last thing that you set up because you need all of your devices integrated into the Hub 2 before you can put them on the universal remote. This is the one device that after using it, I'm not entirely sold on, and it's because of the way that we watch movies in our home theater. There's really 3 devices that are actively in use when we're watching a movie in our home theater. And the first one is a projector. That gets turned on at the beginning and turned off at the end and nothing in between because we just have one HDMI input going into it from the surround sound system. And that's the second device, the surround sound system. Once a movie or a show is started, we're only turning the volume up and down, and we've been able to do that from the Shield TV remote. And then lastly is the Shield TV Pro remote. This is a pretty solid remote. It's got voice function on it, and we're able to control the surround sound volume through this. So once we sit down to watch a movie, we really just need that remote to do just about everything. And I think a lot of people will find themselves in this position where you just have one streaming box that you're doing most of your interaction with, and you don't need to touch anything else. On occasion, we might need to pause the movie, turn the lights on and do something and then come back to it later. And that is a place where the SwitchBot remote can prove to be useful. Unfortunately, in my scenario, I couldn't exactly create that scene because the Shield TV wasn't able to be integrated into the smart home aspect of the remote. So there are 4 programmable buttons at the top, and those buttons are exposed to Apple Home. And for the first button, I put my movie time scene there as well. So that's the same scene that I have on the wall at the Hub 2. And then the next button, the second button on the remote, turns out the lights afterwards, doesn't touch anything else, just turns the lights off. So we're seated and we're ready to watch the movie, hit the second button and the lights are off. And then the third button is if we need to pause it for a second and do something, we can dim the lights up to about 20%. And then the fourth button is to bring all the lights back up to bright in case we really needed that as well. And then lastly, the universal remote is a universal remote for all of those devices. So I do have the Shield TV in there that I can control from this remote. The response time is pretty instantaneous, just like using the Shield TV remote, but I don't have that voice function that I have on the Shield TV remote for searching. It also has the projector that I can swipe to and the surround sound system that I can swipe to. But I can control volume from any one of those. Ultimately, I don't feel that the universal remote is entirely necessary in my home theater. I like to keep things very simple, but I'm gonna be keeping it next to my seat over the next several months and just seeing if I find myself using those programmable buttons or swiping from remote to see what I can actually do with it. At the time of this recording, through March 31st, 2025, the shades are 45% off and the Hub 2 is 25% off. And I highly recommend taking advantage of that because they're at the right price point at that discount. And I really do think they are perfect for the purposes of your home theater. My final thoughts being that I wish the shades were a different material, otherwise they're perfect for a home theater. I wish the Hub 2 wasn't necessary for the shades to have that Matter integration, and maybe I could have researched infrared blasters for one that had more capability and bought that instead. And then the universal remote, not really necessary for my home theater setup right now, but maybe in the future I can find scenes and automations that I can use with it. So that's my smart home theater setup. I am gonna be getting a third shade for the window that just has blinds on it right now. And I'm gonna be seeing how else I can integrate the Hub into future automations and really see what it's capable of. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I hope you learned a little bit and you're gonna save some money on the shades and the Hub too. If you aren't already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Thank you.